Hello, I'm Stephen Burgoyne, and today I'm going to be presenting to you about editorial ethics, ethical issues which pertain to technical editing in general, but particularly technical editing. You might wonder why ethics are important to an editor. I mean, an editor has a paper that somebody else wrote, and they clean it up and make it better and pass it along, and then it gets published. Well, when an editor finishes a paper and says it's good, they say it's good. Their professional word is associated with it. We are professionals, or we intend to be professionals at least, and our word as professionals needs to carry something, needs to carry some weight. And as such, we are partially responsible for the things we say are good, the things we say are ready for publication. And that means we are responsible for falsehoods or intellectual property law infringements, or the confidentiality or the objectivity of the things we're publishing, or the things we're editing and approving before they're published. So I'm going to start with the concerns regarding honesty and accuracy and openness. There are laws and such about libel and fraud and misrepresentation. It is important not to approve things that are illegal, describing people in ways that are criminally destructive of their reputations or of their public perception, or publishing falsehoods as fact that could result in unfair profits or in harm to the consumers. So it's important for an editor to check facts and to verify authorial intent in a piece they are editing. It is possible to prevent some degree of libel or fraud or misrepresentation, or accidental libel, fraud, or misrepresentation, by making sure that what the author has written is actually what they want to publish and has some correlation with reality. Second, there are intellectual property rules. Copyrights in particular are of importance to editors because we deal with primarily the written word. As such, you need to bear in mind that most of the things that are written are automatically copyrighted, and only the author or authors or the person or organization who hired the author or authors to write said documents have the right to reproduce it, or the right to give permission to reproduce it. As such, it is necessary for authors, or if the authors have fallen short, the editors, to acquire permission to reprint anything that is copyrighted and whose copyright hasn't worn out and defaulted into the public domain. You always need to get permission for a copyrighted work, especially if there's profit at stake. And if you're not using a project that's going to have money at stake or possibly deprive the original publisher of profit, like as in the sales of textbooks, there are fair use rules. Students can copy things for their own use in studying if they're not selling it or marketing it or anything, and there are rules involving parody. But that's not terribly important to professional editors. And even if you are using something for free under fair use without permission, then you need to attribute your sources. Attribution of anything that somebody else wrote is absolutely crucial to the honesty and integrity of a written piece. I guess that leads us to confidentiality. There are also in the U.S. confidentiality laws about business secrets or trade secrets or criminal record type things. And an editor really shouldn't disclose somebody else's business secrets or sensitive information, because they were trusted with that data when they were editing it in the first place. And if you have somebody else's sensitive documents, it is important to get their permission before you do anything with them other than what they paid you to do with them. So you can get permission, get written releases to use their sensitive documents as part of your portfolio, or as demo work for another company, or even as basis for work for another company. You just need to keep getting permission because they own that. You don't. And lastly, the concern of objectivity. It is popular for writers and editors, especially in technical fields, to purport to be objective and not spin the facts in any significant way and just represent what is actually there. Of course, that's almost impossible because in the written word, we have structural concerns. We, as writers and editors, choose how to write and represent the things we're communicating. And those structural choices have tremendous effect on how what we write and edit is interpreted. And there's differences in interpretation based on the audiences as well. True neutrality is impossible. And as such, editors need to concern themselves with who's going to benefit from any structural choice in what they're editing, in the things they're editing, sorry. And consider the benefit to the public and to the clients in particular, the people who are paying them, and the human society in general. I guess that covers it. That's awfully short. Anyway, are there questions or concerns?
I think my big question would be, if I were to get a job as a copy editor, what ethical concerns would I have? I mean, what would I suddenly be accountable for in my position?
You would be partially accountable for literally everything that you edited. Not for the entirety of it, but if there are perceptions of fraud or libel, people are going to ask questions of you as well as of the author and the publisher and everybody else involved.
Would that be even if I were to just simply copy edit without making huge editorial changes? In other words, I'm a copy editor rather than the creator, the writer, the author of the document. I'm wondering where that balance is in terms of ethical.
Your responsibility as a copy editor is diminished, but it depends on exactly what you are contracted to do. As a copy editor, you're mostly concerned for the style and the mechanics and whatnot. But fact checking is something that frequently falls to editors, and as such is a thing which they must bear in mind. I think Matthew had his hand up for a question.
Oh, yes. Do you have any idea as to what should be done should a higher-up, be it the author you're editing for, the organization you're editing for, seeks to compromise what you feel is an ethical breach? Like, say, you point out, this could be interpreted as fraud or libel, and say your author or executive says, no, we need to make this point just like this. This is how it's going to have to be. If they reject that change, are you still held liable as an editor, or should you just drop out of the project entirely? What should you do as an editor in order to preserve your sense of ethics and your chance of being employable should your prediction that fraud is correct and you get sacked as an editor, and then you have that stain on your resume? People ask you, so why did you lose this editing job at this big political firm? Well, turns out this was why. What should you do as an editor in an ethical standpoint? I don't think there's any official documentation as to what an editor should do when faced with such a challenge.
That is an excellent question. I'm not sure I can answer that definitively. I would be inclined to weigh the severity of the ethical breach, and do everything I could to get my dissent written down somewhere and documented, to make sure that any blame that fell would fall upon the higher-ups who overrode me. Yes, Samantha?
So I have a relevant comment. You could have a disclaimer in your contract that says that the responsibility for the accuracy of the content lies with the person you're editing for.
Okay. That sounds like a very valuable thing. Brood mentioned in Chapter 22, which was my primary source, a lot of stuff falling on the editors, though editors come in lots of different levels of responsibility and importance. So that sounds like a valuable thing to have in your contract. Anybody else?